Welcome to the Automotive Diagnostic Podcast. We're going to explore ways to sharpen our diagnostic skills, find learning resources, and hear from experts in the automotive field. We have got Auto Rescue Tools and Isaac Rodell as a sponsor for this podcast. Hey guys, if you're looking for programming laptops, you want the laptop set up, ready to go for programming control modules on vehicles. You need key cutting equipment. You need diagnostic tools. Isaac is your guy. Has all that stuff available for purchase, and the support that he offers along with the purchase has been outstanding. I bought some stuff from him in the past. I got my Dolphin key cutting tool from him several years back. And again, the support has been phenomenal. Helped me out along the way with anything additional I needed to make it work for me. So make sure to check that out as well. Again, that's autorescuetools.com. The link will be in the show notes. This episode is brought to you by L1 Automotive Training and Keith Perkins. If you're looking for education on module programming, J2534, EEPROM work, key and immobilizer, electrical diagnostics, or drivability diagnostics, Keith has a website, l1training.com, that's got over 60 hours of training videos on all those subjects and more. When I first started out doing mobile, I utilized Keith's videos on module programming in J2534 in order to get my head wrapped around what I would need for the tooling, the computers, the software setups, what kind of obstacles I would be up against when I'm out there programming modules on cars. And it was a huge benefit to me. And I continue to use the training videos that he has on his website. So I strongly recommend checking out l1training.com. Hey, what's going on, automotive world? Welcome to another episode of the Automotive Diagnostic Podcast. My name is Sean Tipping, and I'll be your host once again for today's episode. Joining me on the show today is John Curtis of JC Diagnostics down in Texas. I'm talking to all the Texas mobile guys recently. JC reached out to me recently, wanted to be on the show. We're going to talk about how he got to where he is doing mobile work, what he was doing prior to that, what drew him towards this line of work, and he will share a number of vehicles and case studies with us, and we'll talk all about the fun stuff that we run into out there in the auto world. So this was great to get to meet him, talk to him for a while. I know you'll enjoy it as well. So let's jump in. All right, sweet. We are live. Well, let's start with this. So it's JC. What's that stand for?
John Curtis.
Okay. I was looking. I was like, I'm not sure if I know what his actual name is. I just saw the JC and the JC Diagnostics. I was like, what? Okay, so now I know.
Yeah, so, that's actually funny. So I actually came out here and I intended on starting a woodworking business and doing cabinetry. And it was John Curtis Woodworks. And I came out here and kind of reverted to what I, was comfortable with. And I didn't have a full shop space, and I was trying to think of a business name, and I was like, oh, JC Mobile Diagnostics.
And where are you at? You're down in Texas?
Yeah, I'm in Texas, Cedar Park, but pretty much Austin, Texas. So if anybody asks, it's Austin.
Okay. It seems like there's all of the mobile guys are down in Texas. I was going through a list in my head this evening. There's Zach, Don. I just talked to Ali, Malcolm, and I know there's a couple others too. I mean, obviously it's a big state, right? There's lots of ground to cover, but it's like everybody's down there.
Yeah, definitely. So there's Don, Zach, Ben, Malcolm.
Oh, Ben, yeah.
Oh gosh, I'm drawing a blank. Oh, Brian Good.
Sure.
Which he's got a shop, but he's definitely in the immediate network.
Okay. Well, that's cool to have so many strong players in one area. You guys all know each other, keep in contact, or what?
Yeah, so we actually have, kind of one of those Facebook chats where it's just us five. And then we also have another Texas chat where it's a few more of us, and actually quite a few more of us. But yeah, no, we're chatting all the time. Zach and Malcolm are actually, I want to say, 30, 40 minutes south of me. So I honestly, some situations, I actually end up calling one of them in just because I might be too busy, or sometimes it's also a business decision in some cases. I will, start a diagnosis on a car, and I have a bunch of, I guess, gravy work, or programming and whatnot. And I kind of spend too much time on one car, so it's like, okay, I gotta see if anybody else is available to look at it, just because it's I gotta keep the ball rolling.
Yep, I get it, man. I've been there too. It's like I could knock out 3 GM transmissions, or I could trace this intermittent Vanos code on a Mini Cooper and maybe not end up with any solid answers. What does the business decision? I mean, that's clear. What I should do is go knock out those 6L80s, right? And yeah, that's kind of nice to have somebody to call in, or take work off your plate, or whatever it might be, right? Just have some backup, or hey, you're out of town or something like that. I went on vacation for the first time since before COVID. I hadn't taken a legit vacation out of town flying somewhere besides going to Vision or ASTE or something in like 3 years. And luckily now I've got a couple guys working for me, so I was able to kind of fall back on that. But man, before that, like, I'd leave town and the work's just piling up. I'm like, it's not even worth it to go anywhere, because I'm slammed the whole next week. But it was actually really nice coming back to a reasonable amount of workload this week when I got back in town. It was really nice.
Yeah, for sure. Being a business owner, man, that's one of those things where it's it just weighs differently on you.
Yeah, you can't turn it off quite the same when you're getting phone calls and turning down work, and that's a bummer for sure. But yeah, like I said, having some people like to support me, Steve and Mike, it was absolutely awesome. So I was able to actually kind of relax and enjoy myself, which was cool. I don't do that too often.
Yeah. Awesome. Where'd you go?
The Gulf Shores of Alabama. I'd never been there, but a couple friends of mine they were having their wedding down there, and they rented this like big 10-bedroom house on the beach, and it's right there on Gulf of Mexico, white sand beach, and it was really cool. I tried surfing for the first time ever, and I was terrible. I was awful at it, but there was a local surf shop. They give lessons, and the guy was super nice and really helpful. And it was a blast though. There was these jellyfish floating around in the water, and I'd never been that close to him before. There's one that was like as big as a dinner plate. And I asked the guys, like, did they sting you? Like, what happens if I fall on the thing or it gets on my leg or something? He's like, it just feels like a lot of mosquito bites all at once. I'm like, okay, I'll still steer clear of those things.
Yeah. So, I'm actually from California, but been out here in Texas for a little bit, and we actually took a vacation. I haven't taken a real vacation, man, but you go like take a little 3-day mini vacation over the weekend,
sure,
and head out to the Gulf, and out here at South Padre Island. And my son, he was what, 6 at the time, and no, he was 5. And the one thing that we didn't tell him is don't touch anything that you don't know what it
sure.
is. And so we're sitting in our tent under the beach, on the beach under the tent, and man, yeah, I see him poking something, and I'm just like, okay, I get up and I go to look, and he's poking the top of a jellyfish. Luckily, it was the top of the jellyfish, so he didn't get stung. But yeah, yeah, parenting. Yeah, got a little parenting lesson there myself. Like, okay, well, I got to keep in mind, like, have these conversations. But yeah, that was fun, and it's one of those things too. Like sitting there, man. And back to being the business owner here, I was getting blown up with phone calls.
Sure.
And it's one of those things, man. Like I didn't shut off my phone. I was pretty new in the business,
Mm-hmm.
and so I kept it going. And I was just telling everybody, "Hey, I'm not in town. I'll take care of you when I get back." And actually ended up getting a call from the shop that basically is the reason why I bought my Voss 6154A, just because it's like, okay, I've gotten enough calls, and it how do you say, it's just you're losing money at a certain point.
Yeah, you turn enough of it away, and you're like, okay, well now it would have made sense for me to buy that tool now.
Yep, for sure. And I mean, especially like Volkswagen and Otis, that's very affordable.
Well, it is, it's a bit of a process for anybody who hasn't like signed up for Otis, installed Otis. Like, you can do that. You can probably figure out any of the manufacturers, but once you have it, like I would never go back to not having Otis for Volkswagen Audi. The way it honestly walks you, like holds your hand through so many processes. I'm just like hitting buttons. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. It's doing stuff. Oh, the car's fixed. Cool. And I'm coming from before that. I was just trying to do like coding with Autel or stuff like that. And it just miserable. It never worked right. There was always issues, and it was a couple brands that I really struggled with. But man, it is for doing the programming stuff that I do, but even diagnostics, that's lights out. Get it if you have any hesitation and you see Volkswagen Audis, just freaking get the thing.
Yeah, it's they took out the wiring diagrams and stuff. Yeah,
it's a bummer.
But I think they just brought back. What did they bring back?
There was something. I forgot what it was.
PR codes.
Oh, okay.
So they just brought back PR codes, but the just having the OEM tool there, like I deal with a few body shops. I don't have a whole lot of body shops just because ProTech is absolutely everywhere here. Well, you got ProTech, Elitech, and I think All Clear Diagnostics. But the body shops that I do deal with, the majority of what I end up seeing there is Volkswagen, Audi stuff, and then I guess a lot of Nissan. But it's usually airbag stuff. The way that Otis has you deal with the airbag stuff is, I mean, it's airbag diagnostics, I guess, but it'll give you, specific values and everything. And it's just, test here, do this, do that. And it really does hold your hand through the whole process.
Right. Not the most friendly user interface, I would say, but once you kind of get a feel for it and you can navigate it a little bit, it's not bad. I honestly, I enjoy having it as far as a factory scan tool setup. And yeah, I was able to snag one of those 6154s because I was using my iScan with the IMS2 function prior to that, but I had some issues with version 11. Actually, it just stopped working, if I remember correctly, because I had the Cardac first when I very first got Otis. I was using the Cardac and it wouldn't do the key cycles, so I was limited on some stuff. And then I got the IMS2 version with iScan, which emulates the factory tool. But then when 11 came out, which is like a few months later, that stopped working. I think they have that straightened out now, but that's when I was, and actually, Ollie helped me out. He was able to connect me with the guy who was selling them. And so that was awesome to get one of those things. But yeah, it's just, I have definitely and still do struggle with European stuff. but having that factory setup is the way to go. This is my next one. I've been dragging my feet on it, and I haven't gotten around to it, but that's my next one I'm getting set up with.
Yeah. So you're not you don't have an icon?
So I have a cloned ICOM, and I wanted to buy a legit one, couldn't find one at the time. I was like ready to drop the money. Like they just weren't available. So I bought this cloned one. And everybody says, hey, those clone ones will actually work just fine with the factory. I haven't tried that. I don't know if that's necessarily true, but I just got to get and this, hey, tell me if I'm wrong, but based on what everybody tells me is I want to get my just a laptop set up for that, and it's my BMW laptop, and so I gotta do that, and I think that's what I've been dragging my feet on recently.
Yeah. So with BMW, I know a lot of people. From what I heard before, I actually started doing them. Is they take an insane amount of time, 8 hours, whatever, and I mean they typically run 55 minutes, maybe an hour and 15, hour and 20 minutes. Um, and the ones that you got to look out for is the F chassis, up to like 2017. Any F chassis up to 2017, those head units, like you'll get everything going, everything's completely fine. Just make sure you buckle on the driver's side seat belt. Otherwise, the car will go to sleep, and then you either end up breaking the FEM or the oh gosh, BDC.
Okay.
So so just if you're programming a BMW, make sure you got that driver's side seatbelt buckled in before you start.
Gotcha.
Because you don't want that car to time out on you and go to sleep, and then next thing you know, you can't shut off the ignition, and you're basically dead in the water.
Oof.
And then once you disconnect the battery, well, you can't ignition it on. Which there's some pretty easy methods to recover them, but that's a whole different discussion.
Right.
If you just buckle in, if you buckle in, it's save you some headache.
Buckle up for BMW. I like that. Yeah, I've heard from a couple different people those head units bricking during as far as I understand, a 100% legit programming operation, right? They got the factory tool, they got the factory program, they've got a voltage maintainer, they're connected, they're hardwired to the internet, all that good stuff, and it still just goes to shit. So, yeah. And I've asked multiple people this, and everybody tells me you can't do this. But I was like, well, why don't you just unplug it or pull the fuse on that module before you start? And so just maybe would it just skip over that? But everybody says no, it doesn't work that way. So I don't know.
That is actually something that I've considered doing, but I honestly didn't know if it would work. And honestly, I haven't had the balls to try it.
Right. It's one of those things. It's like, what'll happen if I do that? And I don't know if I end up in that situation, I'm probably the guy that'll give that a try. So if it works, I'll let you know.
Yeah, for sure. Fuck around, find out territory.
Yeah, I find myself in that place quite often, actually. And as I've done this longer and longer, I'm a little bit more brave when it comes to that stuff. I'm like, well, this module's probably only like $500. So let's give it a try. I actually just did it was on what year was that? 2017 X3, I think is it was 17 X3, the little touch display screen that's up on the dash. I believe that is the head unit for that particular vehicle. The screen was out, and I was able to source the screen, just the screen itself, for $70 plus some shipping. Took the thing apart. Incredibly easy to take this thing apart. Like, they pull it out of the dash, and then you take it apart, swap out the screen, put it back together. It worked perfectly fine. And so that was I was like, okay, so I could start looking for these sorts of things and just a little extra, a service that I can offer shops when stuff like that happens. I ended up doing a Camry for that same shop that had a touchscreen issue, and as you do some Google searching, you can find screens for most of these things pretty easy. So that was kind of cool.
Yeah, that's cool. being able to offer services like that, it definitely adds value to the shop. It brings value to our business, helps them help their customer.
Yep.
And honestly, it's one of the things that sets us apart.
Yeah. I'm always looking for something to add on to what I do. Not in the mindset of just like grabbing at everything possible I can and never really getting good at one thing. But, our industry is always shifting and there's always other players coming in. And like you said, like there's other big box companies coming for the kinds of work that we do. And there's remote programming coming for a lot of what we do. Right. So I just don't want to have all my eggs in one basket. I want to be able to pivot. I want to have other, income streams and skill sets that can bring those in. So I'm always just kind of like feeling out like, okay, where else could I provide a service? What else could I do for shops out there? What's the need? What's the broken thing that people are running up against in their day to day? And so if I can pick some of that stuff out and get ahead of it, that's kind of my goal. And that was just one thing. Like I'm not going to make a business off of that, but I mean, it was easy. I would do that again for sure.
Yeah, for sure. So, speaking of switching out that display screen, I haven't actually worked with this one shop in a while, but it's a commercial shop, actually. I'm not sure if I can say the name on here, but so they ended up calling me. Their technician ended up breaking the plastic on a Fiat cluster, a Fiat 500.
Okay.
And so they got a replacement one. And I was like, okay, like, do you want me to do the mileage correction? Because we could get the odometer to stop flashing, but we're still not going to have the correct mileage. We're not going to have this. Like, but what do we want to do here? They're just like, whatever. We just need to get this squared away for the customer. So I end up grabbing it, running home. Realized that there's only a couple of clips holding on the front plastic. Just pop that off real quick. It was maybe a 5-minute job. Pop on the cover real quick, went back, installed it, and it was good to go.
Nice. Yeah, some of the stuff's not as bad as you think. You get into it, you're like, oh, well, that was easy. I was like jobs like that.
So I've got like what do you call it? The ACDP.
Sure.
And
fantastic tool.
So yeah, no, for sure. So one of my shops, I've only been working with this shop for about 2.5 to 3 months. Honestly, one of the only valuable customers that I got from a marketing campaign that I did. But this one particular shop is feeding me all kinds of oddball work, to say the least. Doing all kinds of like clusters, mileage corrections. They gave me what was it? A EIS for a 2014 Mercedes.
Uh-huh.
And they're like, well, the dealer diagnostic said it needed a steering lock, and then they said it needed an EIS.
Okay.
And so I guess they sold the steering lock. But honestly, I'm not too sure what work was actually completed on this thing, because the car is actually an ongoing project, and I have an emulator on its way.
Okay.
So anyway, they gave me a W207 EIS, and it's used. And I was like, well, I'm not quite sure if I can make this one happen. I know I've cloned other EISs, but I just haven't done this one. And it doesn't look like any tooling that I have covers it exactly. So I end up finding out a solution, and going over to the vehicle with everything ready to go. And they plug in the original EIS, and they turn the key, and it recognizes the key position.
Okay.
And it lights up. And
the
right away, I'm
up?
just like, yeah. Okay. Yeah. So right away, I'm just like, we're going to be in the same position here.
Yeah.
So anyway, they did that, and I ended up swapping it out and, adding the key, because that's what I was there to do. And the other part of the job had to be activated when it's on the car. And after that, it's just like, hey, sorry to break the news to you, but we did what we were asked, and the car's not fixed.
Right.
Um, but they threw that one at me, and then I've gotten to do a couple of the 8-speed ZFs on the Chrysler Dodge Jeep Ram variety,
Sure.
and that's apparently, well, according to this shop, they are having a hard time getting them brand new.
Yeah. I've run into the same thing with those 8-speed transmissions in the like trucks and Durangos and stuff like that, where shops are having a heck of a time. And so it's weird on those. I've actually run into a couple where the shop had already installed the used one. They didn't really know that anything needed to happen. And I was able to make it work without really not doing any cloning really, and just some scan tool functions, and it worked. But then the complete opposite too. I've seen them where you have to clone it. That's the only way that it's going to work. And I don't know. I'm sure there's applications where it just seems to matter more than others, or maybe it's how different the software and the transmission is from one to another.
Yeah.
That might be the case in some of them, but yeah, those the 8-speeds you're talking about, is that strictly like Mopar Chrysler stuff, or have you done any of the other ones like I think there's 8-speeds in the BMWs too?
So the 8-speeds in the BMWs, I've actually been doing those for a while, but I haven't been cloning them.
Okay.
So I've got the Autel IM508, and for the 8-speeds, it works really well on the F chassis to reset the EGS.
Sure. Do you transfer over the coding when you do that too?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've only done one of those, but I did the same thing. I used the Autel and was able to transfer that over. So that worked out pretty well. That was another one where the shop had no clue, and they called me and they're like, hey, this thing won't go into gear. I'm like, yeah. No,
Yeah.
Well, it's a used transmission. Can you do anything? I'm like, well, I can, but hey, next time maybe give me a ring before you do this massive job and are trying to deliver it to the customer. Being able to provide those types of solutions to shops and to customers is huge. That's, I think, where it sets you apart. Cause I don't know, I don't think you're going to find a whole lot of like big box places that are going to be doing that sort of thing. But it takes some work, right? It takes the tooling and it takes the understanding, right? So for somebody listening to you talk about that Mercedes and you rattle off like 2 or 3 different acronyms and they're like, I don't even know what those components are, right? Like you have to do your homework just to figure out what components are involved and then what tools I need and then how do I do it and what's required. And it's a lot. I did one of those steering lock, went through that on a couple of different Mercedes recently, actually. And the first one I did, I was like, it was a night's worth of reading to kind of get my head wrapped around everything that I needed to be aware of, what was going on, what the issue was, what the options are to fix it, how to fix it, the order of programming, all of that stuff. It's a ton of work, but you charge appropriately for it too, right? Number one, you got that Mercedes logo on the front, so that just kind of brings the price up all on its own. But then it's a big job, man, and like I just described, it's a lot of legwork to get to that point, and tooling and understanding. So it's good work once you figure out how to do it.
One of the things that I try to focus on, but also on the other side of things, like there's quite a few guys, and I actually see more and more people doing EEPROM and cloning out here. The majority of them tend to do like airbag stuff.
Sure, they can have that.
No, for sure. That is nothing I want to get involved in. Actually, just thinking about this right now. So I started a mailer campaign through MailShark back in, June or July. And no, May. And it ran for like 3 months or 10 weeks or something like that. And milled out,
Okay.
5,000 millers to 1,500 shots. And
Okay.
man, the amount of used car lots that call, it's wild.
Yeah, that's my number one. The people that have asked me about crash resets on those modules. And so when I first started getting into this EEPROM stuff, I did a couple of them for some friends, techs that I
Hmm.
know, and they're like, yeah, I'm just, I bought this vehicle and blah, blah, blah. And so I'm like, all right, I just want to see if I can do it. Right. And I did it and I just felt wrong about it, because
Yeah,
the odds of that thing working are pretty likely, right? You're just resetting the data, but what if it doesn't? And as far as like
yeah,
a business side of things, I have no interest in getting involved with that at all. Plus, here's the other thing: if you go on eBay or whatever and you find these people offering the services online, they're doing it for like pennies on the dollar. Like I saw like $40, $50 for this reset. And so I'll
yeah.
tell people, I'm like, it's not even worth me considering doing it for that dollar amount. Just mail it to those people. They can take on the liability. I'm sure they won't at all. It'll be on the person who actually is, putting it in the car. But no, thank you. I have no interest in that. But yeah, used car lots for sure. They always want that. Let's get that used crash mod
Yeah.
or that crash module that was in there to be reset and have that crash data wiped out of there.
Just not something I want to get involved in, put myself at risk there. And there's just
Right.
so much more
Right.
money to be made.
Exactly. Exactly. There's so much more liability free or a lot less liability tied to more lucrative work. So they can have those.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah, for sure.
well, we probably should have started with this. I'm pretty good at just like getting into the conversation and then going back to the beginning. So you mentioned earlier you started with woodworking, and then how did you get from that to doing mobile programming and diagnostics?
Yeah, so okay. I just had that interest in cars for a really, really long time. Kind of something I wanted to do, um, but never actually considered it professionally. I've just always had this thing where I've had to know how things work. And
Mm-hmm.
since I was a child, getting into computer programming, not, module programming, but actual writing code and stuff like that, playing around, figuring out just all kinds of different things, and doing a lot of things for fun, hacking, just see if I can, remote into a computer. Just, honestly, just the curious side of me. Um, and going from there, and then I ended up doing investigations. I left investigate. Well, I was loss prevention, kind of worked my way through the chain, started doing investigations, and then left there, and then started doing the woodworking. And
Okay.
when I was doing the woodworking, um, I wanted to move out here to Texas, and ended up coming out here to Texas and quickly realized like I didn't have sufficient space to do everything that I needed to do. Um, and because I had that interest in cars, actually had learned out of necessity in a lot of cases. I had a, oh gosh, '04 Colorado, spent a lot of money on it, could not get it fixed anywhere. And I got to learn about the 5-volt reference then. Just looking online, like 5-volt reference code. I had a, I don't know, $60 reader from the parts store, and finally, it took me forever. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I honestly had no idea what it was, but finally got around to getting that thing fixed, and then just helping friends and family and stuff get their stuff sorted out, and then um, I actually had a Mitsubishi Eclipse, um, and that thing, so I had a parasitic drain on it,
Okay.
and I could never pinpoint it. So I had my Eclipse, and then I had a '01 Silverado because those things are tanks. And
Sure. Sure.
my girlfriend, every time she would drive it, it would have the parasitic drain. and I couldn't
Okay.
figure out what it was. And every single time, like I went to go look at this thing, it was never acting up. And so one day I ended up taking it to work, and I realized that when I shut the doors, the headlights turned on. So
Mm.
it's just like, well, that's interesting. Um, it was a really silly it was a multi-function switch that went out on that thing, and sometimes,
Okay.
and it didn't happen all the time, when you would shut that door, it would, you know, complete a circuit and yeah, cause the drain.
Huh.
And
Oh, weird.
yeah, yeah, and then same vehicle actually, she was driving it, and it just stopped on her on the way actually back from work. And I'm just like, okay, it's probably a fuel pump. We end up towing it back. Well, I picked her up and had the tow truck tow it back and hooked up the scanner, and I couldn't communicate with the engine computer. Um, and I was like, okay. So there's actually a few things that had happened there. But, you know, just that one really got me learning how to read wiring diagrams. And this is, man, quite a while ago. And
Okay.
so, you know, just doing that, and the interest was there, the ability to kind of think about these problems was there. So I honestly got hooked on Scanner Danner, and
Mm-hmm.
that guy, you know, is probably the godfather of a lot of guys' careers.
Yeah, that's an understatement. I think just about anybody you talk to in this field has something good to say or some thanks to give to Paul.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So I was actually at a shop the other day, and not to sidebar here too much, but the technician there, he was like, man, he was like, if I run into something, because it was my first time working there, he was like, if I run into something, can I call you? He was like, usually I look on YouTube and there's this guy, Scanner Danner, who's helped me out a lot of times, but I don't fully grasp everything, and it's definitely a lot to grasp. But
Mm-hmm.
so anyway, that guy though, he's made a world of change to me, and those fundamentals, you know, 5 different types of sensors. How do you approach this, and just getting that very basic understanding. And when we look at cars, 9 times out of 10, it is the most basic things that end up fixing the car.
Yeah, it's usually a bent pin or broken wire or bad connection somewhere, or it's it's honestly not that often something truly crazy. Sometimes that
Yep.
happens, but usually it's something really simple.
When I came out here, I had this idea of being a mobile mechanic. Uh, Not the brightest idea. Just, you know, people are uh, super cheap. I was charging not accordingly, um, not at all, but you know, getting the used car guys, and you know, doing stuff in people's driveways, and doing just more so R&R work and some
Sure.
diagnostics. And I knew for a long time, you know, just watching Paul and Keith DeFazio. Um, I wanted to get into that side of things and really focus on it. And
Okay.
so I ended up, you know, just decided one day, you know what, I am going to start shifting my focus, not stop what I'm doing right now, but I'm going to start the shift and start working toward getting shots. And so, you know, just approach them, get a couple shops around me, and they started calling me more and more. And you know, it's one of those things too where I started to see like these shops are. I honestly don't. It's hard to say, but some of them maybe are good at R&R, but
Mm-hmm.
they just don't have that diagnostic side. And
Right.
you know, and I mean, we need those. I mean, there's some kick-ass technicians at R&R.
Yes, sir.
Some
Yes,
guys have
sir.
helped me get some stuff done in very efficient manner.
Uh-huh.
When I'm just looking at something and I'm like, man, this is gonna have me pull this um, radiator, and I've gotta pull. Sorry, not the radiator. Pull the oh gosh, AC compressor to do a starter in a Nissan. And
Uh-huh.
so somebody was like, well, no, you just, loosen up these bolts and, put a piece of cardboard here and do that. And,
Uh-huh.
save me a lot of hours. And
Yep.
so, some guys are just amazing at R&R. And,
Uh-huh.
me, not coming from that shop background and just really grasping the most basics of electrical, it it gave me the chance to kind of fill in pieces where the shops tended to struggle.
Yeah. Yeah. There was a time where I was definitely that R&R guy, and I could rock it out with the best of them. 100 flats a week. Like, I was cranking the R&R workout. Now, I haven't done that since full time since 2017. So I'm looking at some of these jobs when I'm in shops. I'm like, I mean, I know I can still take some stuff apart. I did a water pump in my van a couple of weeks ago because I went out. I'm like, all right, I still got it. I still beat book time. But man, like, I'm looking at some of these jobs. I'm like, I don't think my skills are quite where they used to be. And so if I had a big job, I don't know, I might just take it to somebody, one of these shops I know, say, hey guys, you guys are going to do this a lot easier than me on the floor of my garage. But that's the thing though, right? That is its own skill. And you can be really, really
Yep.
good at that skill. And that can be your thing. You can make a lot of money
Mm-hmm.
doing that too. But I've talked about this before on the podcast, is like, we're as a general automotive service technician, we're asked to be good at so many things, to be an expert at so many different areas, and I think it's too much for your average guy. There's a few people out there that can handle it all and be really good at it all, and those are outliers, right? Those are unicorns. That's not your average person in a shop. That's just not your average person. Be good at so many different things. They're going to gravitate towards one area or another, or apply themselves in one area or another, right? And outside of the automotive world, we don't ask that of people, right? You don't have a house repairman, right? You have a plumber or an
Yep.
HVAC or electrician or a roofer or a painter or a carpenter or a carpet layer, right? People have applied themselves to be really good at one area. And I think what's happening right now in the industry and I'm probably biased because it's all the people I talk to, but like the kind of the rise of the mobile people in this industry, it's just, the need is there for guys who are specifically good at this thing, and we're there to provide support for everybody else who doesn't have that person in their shop. And they probably don't have that person in the shop because flat rate doesn't pay Diag well. That's probably how we got to where we're at. But I mean, I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's good to specialize, get really good at one specific area of the vehicle, because it's too damn big to try to be an expert on all of it. Again, there's guys out there who can do it, and more power to you, man. But it's just, why not specialize and be really good at one area? I think that's the way to go.
Yep. Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, we've got, HVAC, AC, we've got to deal with the electrical, the engine mechanical side of things. Now there's the ADAS, and just so many
Yeah.
different things there. Suspension stuff. I mean, I, not having that shop background, I honestly, like, I've been asked to look at some suspension stuff, and I'm like, nope, I'm not your guy. And, but, the same shop, they'll say, hey, we did some work on this, it drove in, and now it's not starting. And, so you go out there, and it's like, okay, well, this sensor right here looks nice and shiny, and it's got a wallet with wings on it, and it's pulling down your reference voltage. So,
Yeah. Right. So how, sorry if you already touched on this, but how did you like decide, okay, I'm going to get into the programming stuff? Like what, or what did that look like? What did you go out and buy? How did you start that? What began it for you?
So there's a lot of frustrations. When you're diagnosing something, you look, and the first thing I'm looking for is a TSB. And a
Uh-huh.
lot of those TSBs start with, oh, there's a flash update. Um, and I ran into so much of that, and then having to send it to the dealer for the shop to turn around and have me go back and look at the car again because, I mean, you could chase your tail on it.
Sure.
And so at at a certain point, actually, it was a 2010 Chevy HHR, I think it was, and it was actually an individual, and they asked me to look at it. So I looked at it, and it's kind of as I was phasing out, mobile service in that aspect. But I went to go look at it, and it had a VIN mismatch code in the ABS module,
Okay.
and I I really wanted to get it resolved, and I didn't have the ability to. And actually, that day or within a few days, um, I was just thinking about it, and it was just kind of weighing on me. And it's kind of one of those things where it's like, okay, enough's enough. And I started looking around, and all of a sudden, a pass-through Pro 4 popped up on eBay, and it was in
Okay.
like the final hour, I think it was, and it was only like $700, and the thing was in like it didn't even look like it'd been touched. And
Nice.
so I was looking at it. I had no idea if it was, I knew nothing, absolutely nothing. I
Uh-huh.
just knew that it was time for me to start, growing there. And I ended up picking it up for about $800. And I
Nice.
just grabbed a laptop and installed GM, and GM and Ford were kind of the first ones that I dipped my feet in.
Mm-hmm. Just kind of grew from there.
Yeah, yeah. So went from there and then ended up doing some Chrysler stuff and kind of stuck with the big three for a while. Um, I had done a couple of Nissans and Hondas like here and there, but not with the J box or anything like that. It was VIN registration immobilizer stuff using a little, what is it, X431 Pro S Mini or something like that, the little China launch. And
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
so yeah, so just going from there, kind of expanding there, and then um, got a little heavier into the Asian programming, and then at some point I was just like, okay, I'm gonna try to do everything that I can. So now I'll go do a Mercedes cloner, have some different methods because I don't have the Zentry. Um, but I can definitely go out there and offer it to a shop and help them get what they need done. And
Mm-hmm.
Jaguar Land Rover. Jaguar Land Rover actually turns out to be one of my biggest, probably the biggest European moneymaker for me. Maybe
Interesting.
Volkswagen and Audi. I don't know. There's so much of it here. It's actually like, honestly, I
That's
see
so
them
weird.
everywhere.
That's one brand that I rarely get calls on. Here and there, I'll get a Land
Yeah,
Rover. If they need something diagnosed on it or whatever. But
yeah,
yeah, for whatever reason, and it's weird how brands are like that across the U.S. Like there's places where nobody sees any Subarus. I see a ton of
yep.
Subarus all the time. But yeah. Anyway,
Yeah.
sorry.
Jaguar Land Rover, I don't see a lot of the Topics Cloud Pathfinder vehicles, but I do see a
Okay.
bunch of the SDD vehicles. And what I do see on like the Topics Cloud and Pathfinder vehicles, um, it tends to be headlights and nothing super exciting. Um, but for whatever reason, I just get a whole bunch of them, and it's funny. I go down to a BMW specific shop and I repair FRM modules for them. And, when I first actually talked to them and just gave my spiel, they're just like, well, we do not touch Jaguar or Land Rover because of the cost to the shop is
Oh, okay.
just so far higher than anything else. So that may be something where people don't want to get involved with them just because of the cost of the parts, and um, I don't know what it is. The European car owner, especially when you start getting into the third owners, they expect
Yeah.
miracles for nothing.
Yeah, that thing's bellied out and has a transmission out of it, and the instrument cluster's locking up, and it's in an anti-theft state, and it's like, okay, how much money are you going to put into this thing, man? But
Yeah.
yeah, the European thing, I've just been forcing myself to get more involved with it as time has gone on, because it's not necessarily easy. It's not necessarily cheap in a lot of cases, but it's good, lucrative work once you figure it out. Once you bite the bullet, you get the tools, you figure out what you need to figure out. A lot of people that own those vehicles they're just used to it. Like, it's gonna be expensive to fix. That's the way it is.
Yep.
And so, you can be much higher than some of the domestic counterparts, and nobody blinks an eye. Just like, yep, it's a BMW. Okay, $400. All right, that's the way it is, right?
Yep.
And so it's good work for sure. And so I definitely shied away from even just the repair side of it, but especially diagnostics earlier in my career. But hey, man, let's go. Bring it on. I'll take it on. See what, and sometimes I get beat up. Sometimes I don't win, but how else are you going to know?
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's how you get good. I mean, you're not growing doing the same thing over and over.
That's right. Yeah, you got to get outside of that comfort zone if you want to get better. And you got to take on that challenge, that thing that you're not that good at. You don't know that well, but yeah, that's the only way you're gonna get good at it, is by giving it a shot. And yeah, maybe you're gonna fail, you're gonna screw up, you're gonna look stupid, cost yourself some money, bricking a module or whatever it might be, making a bad call on a diag. But how else? You got to jump
Yeah,
in, you got to give it a try.
yeah, yeah. Bad calls definitely happen. I know, like,
Yeah.
a big part of our business is to be what? Accurate. And
Mm-hmm.
everyone, I mean, sometimes it happens, and heck, sometimes when it rains, it pours. But
Yeah.
man, I'm glad to have a network of guys that have been there to help me grow and maybe give me a right direction, or maybe be like, hey man, like, double, uh, I wouldn't be making that call, or
Right.
just things like that. And there's one where I seem to I said this in a group the other day. It seems that the majority of my bad calls that I end up making are pin fitment problems. And
Yeah, those can be tricky.
it's one of those things where, like, there's one in particular, I was super frustrated with it because, man, I was so close. Ended up calling an ECM on a, oh gosh, some sort of Buick. And I it's one of those things where it's like, wow, how did I miss it? But essentially, shop brought it in and did some work to it. I think they swapped out the engine, and now it is a no crank.
Okay.
Well, uh, I run through the process, and I'm like, okay, well, we're getting, so there's the range sensor sends out a signal to the ECM, and that's
Mm-hmm.
how the ECM sees, hey, this is where um, it gives it the okay, saying, hey, we're in neutral or we're in park. We can go ahead and start the car.
Mm-hmm.
And so I check it and I see that we're grounding, and I see that the ECM is not seeing the signal. I look at the connector and I actually did a pin fitment test on it. and it
Mm-hmm.
passed the pin fitment test. But it was the actual connector itself that it wasn't fully latching down. And it's because, honestly, I don't know exactly what happened there, if it was sabotage, but the technician that was initially working on the car wasn't there at the time that I got called in to look at it, was no longer at that shop.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And so it ended up being, that connector problem. But,
Yeah.
it's things like that. And you get burned enough on something, and it's just like, okay, like, you got to remember those ass kickings for the next time.
Yeah. That's the thing is when you get your butt kicked on something and you eventually get to the other side of it, bad call and all, you're not going to forget that. Like that is now,
Yeah.
hopefully, the ideal would be that is burned into your brain. And next time you come across that, that's the first thing you're checking.
Yeah. So, couple of things I kind of wanted to just mention here on the chat. Just a couple of, cases where I've actually ran into. Um, and honestly, I don't know if guys are really going to be running into this. So one of the first things that I kind of wanted to bring up was I want to say it's like a 2007 F-150. And I
Okay.
had been asked to replace the PCM on this thing. And so I get out there, I program in the PCM, and they replaced it because it didn't have AC operation and it wasn't controlling the compressor. So,
Okay.
so at this point, I'm like, okay, well, everything's programmed in. And I ask them, hey, do you want me to diagnose this? I start jumping down the diagnostic path. And I'm looking,
Sure.
all the inputs look good, just very basic scan data, not to go like crazy into detail. But I started jumping down a rabbit hole. I mean, typical, electrical diagnostic path on why aren't we getting compressor activation. Yep.
Can I pause you real quick? All right, I want to do something here. I'm gonna write down on a piece of paper what I think it is right now, and then I'm gonna wait until you tell me. But we'll see if I'm right. Just only because I feel like I've run into this before. But okay, I got it written down, so we'll see if I get this correct or not. Keep going.
Yeah, so I go through everything and I'm like, okay, everything is intact circuit wise, everything looks good input wise. And one of the things that I didn't pay attention to was my pre-scan, just because it's I scan it, have it there for documentation's sake. And so I end up going back to my pre-scan. And inside of the instrument cluster, I don't remember the exact code, but there was a code in there pertaining, I don't remember if it was a VIN mismatch code or if it was a configuration mismatch or something like that. But long story short, turned out to be the instrument cluster had the incorrect as-built data.
I don't know. Is mine backwards?
Yeah.
It says cluster. I think my screen's mirrored, but yes, it says cluster for that exact same thing. I was at Firestone and I probably got my butt kicked for 2 days on this thing because I'm like, everything's here. And I don't recall like a mismatch code or whatever, but eventually by digging, because I didn't do any programming at the time, eventually found out and talked to the customer and we put a cluster in that not that long ago. It was a used one, blah, blah, blah. And okay. All right. And then we finally got it figured out, but man, that was a bear. Cause if I recall right, you can tell me if yours was the same. There are no data PIDs in the cluster that indicate what you want to know or no helpful information because the AC request is getting passed through the cluster to get to the PCM. It goes HVAC, medium speed can, cluster, high speed can, PCM.
Yeah.
And there's nothing in there to help you. There's no data PIDs indicating that anything's happening. And I mean, you got to pay attention to the diagram, the system operation to even know that the cluster is involved, period. But then once you do, it's unless you have that programming capability and understanding, it's still not real clear whether the cluster's doing what it's supposed to or not. You just see, hey, I'm pressing the button. the PCM's not seeing the request, but everything else seems to be there, right? That sort of thing is
Yeah.
really weird.
Yeah. So, you know, I got to a point where I looked back at it because, jumping down the rabbit hole there, and kind of loops back to follow a process. In my
Mm-hmm.
case, I was lucky enough to have a data PID, which, or not a data PID, have a code where that would have told me what I needed to know. And then, yeah, you look at the diagram, you see that the instrument cluster is involved. You can see that
Mm-hmm.
the CAN passes through it. And once I seen the code in the cluster, and I was like, wait, this is on the diagram, kind of put two and two together. And,
Sure.
I just went in real quick, did the as-built data, AC was operating. And,
Nice.
I just think that that's one where, man, I definitely, I mean, the shop got their ass kicked on it. I would have got my ass kicked on it. I would have made a bad call if the shop hadn't already made the call in what I already was there to program.
Yeah, actually, that truck, that I think it was a 2010, if I remember right, but that particular truck and spending 2 days on it was the reason I bought my first Autel. I had been using the shops. At the time we had this awful, terrible OTC Pegasus, and it was the successor
Oh
to the
God.
Genesis, which actually for an aftermarket tool at the time, the OTC Genesis was a great tool. But they followed that up with the Pegasus, so they tried putting a scope into the tool, and it was awful. Probably one of the worst scan tools I've ever used. And I hated that thing so much. But I never owned my own scan tool up until that point. I was a tech, and the shops had scan tools. Why would I buy one? I had a code reader, and that was it. And that motivated me to go out. I'm like, I gotta go find something that, because I wanted to code the cluster after I figured out that's what it was. I'm like, I want something that can do this. And I wasn't at the point where I was buying laptops and IDS and stuff yet, but I was like, what else can do it out there? And I ended up buying the DS708 Autel,
Okay.
and that thing was just a freaking beast because they stole everybody's software. I remember the first time seeing the Ford power balance on a scan tool. I'm like, what is this? I'm over here like a caveman using mode 6 to chase these stupid coils down, and now I got this like real-time graphic of misfires on the Fords. I'm like, this is a gold mine for me at the time. So yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. That was the truck that got me to buy my first Autel, my first own personal scan tool that I owned.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I go into so many shops, and a lot of the techs still don't have their own scanners.
Right. And I mean, hey, in a certain situation, you shouldn't have to own that. The shop should provide the tools to fix the cars, right? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
if the scan tool is an obstacle to getting the car fixed at your business that fixes cars for compensation, as a business owner, why would you not buy the scan tool that helps your techs do the job that brings the money into the business? Like, I
Yeah.
don't get it, but yeah, like I don't think a tech should have to buy their own scan tool. If you want to, more power to you, and that's going to help you. But I don't think you should have to as an employee at a business.
On top of that, some of these shops, man, they don't have service info. There's
Dude,
quite a few
yeah.
where
What the
I
fuck?
don't get it.
I have
Yeah.
no idea. Like that's one where it's like, okay, you're not you don't understand any of how this should work, or you come from such a different background or side of the business. I don't know. I can't even comprehend getting through the day. So I deal with a lot of shops. There's a lot of Vietnamese run shops that I have serviced in the past, and some of them I still do. And They were definitely some of them that just no service information, would just use YouTube and Google. I'm just like, come on, guys. Because, well, here's the thing I would get. I'd be like, replace this component. Like, well, where's the component? I'm like, look it up. Like, that's not my job to tell you where the part. Like, if you can't figure out where the part is on the car, like, what are you doing? What are you doing? But yeah, I don't know, man. It's wild out there. There's such a variation in levels of shop, and I'm sure you see it out there. Like, some of these places are on their game, really, really well run places, but then the complete opposite end of the spectrum too. It is pretty crazy to see what's out there, and other people have said this too. I know PJ recently, I was talking to, like, he didn't fully grasp the state of the industry until he started doing mobile, and just like, wow. There's a place up here, and I don't work with this guy anymore for a number of reasons, but he doesn't have heat in his shop. Like, it's Minnesota. It gets really cold in the wintertime, like 30, 40 below zero when it's January, February. And he doesn't have like a heater. Like, every shop has some type of heater, whether it be the big, gas furnace. Some of them will have these long tubes that go across the ceiling. Some of them have in-floor heat, but like, you have heat in your shop, and he doesn't have that. And he would run these little propane sunflower heaters in the wintertime, and it's like 40 degrees in the shop. If you would have told me that prior to doing the mobile stuff, I'm like, no way. This BS. There's no way that guy runs a business year after year, but he does. And for some, who knows why reason, he has techs that work there. I don't get it, but yeah, it's pretty crazy, man.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it definitely is. And, when I first started, it was very demoralizing. I mean, going into shops, I mean, not just the lack of service info. Sometimes, like, there's one situation where the shop, the technician, he had the right idea, but the shop owner didn't give him access to what he needed. And actually, that tech ended up quitting and ended up going to work for a European shop that had everything, all the Euro tools, everything. And, night and day difference there. But the technician, he was just super upset. And anyway, when I went there, though, he actually shadowed me on the diagnosis. And I don't remember what vehicle this was. All I remember is that there was a sensor pulling down the 5 volts. And it was a cam sensor. It was a cam sensor. I think it was on a Toyota. It was a Toyota, because I remember trying to figure out the location of a specific component, and I couldn't figure it out exactly. Goodness, I'm just drawing such a blank right now. But he shadowed me on this thing, and I was having a hard time finding the location of the component. I only had one service information at that time, and that was all data. And I had kind of jumped back and forth between all data and Identifix, and now I've got both of them. But I was having such a hard time locating the specific diagram that I needed. I want to say there was like internet issues there, and the metal building. I think that was my problem.
Oh yeah.
And so at some point, so at some point I'm like, okay, I just got to start doing something here. And so I just unplug a sensor, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to look for everything with this color wire, because I could not, for the life of me, pull up service info in that shop. And actually, the second sensor I unplugged was, the sensor that was causing the problem.
Nice. Yeah, that's a really good idea to bring up when you're kind of lost in a diagnostic, or maybe you don't even know where to start, right? And you're just like, man, I feel overwhelmed by the problem, or the system or whatever. And you should do your homework and try to get your head wrapped around it. But sometimes like we all end up there, right? For one reason or another. Just like, man, I just start with something. Just start somewhere. Start doing something within the system. Start testing some things. Even if you don't think that's what the problem's going to be, like it might get your brain flowing. Maybe you'll find it, right? Maybe you just get lucky. That happens too. The odds are so that you could stumble upon it, but it's going to get you involved with the system. It's going to get you eyes on it, hands on it, start testing stuff. And I've definitely found myself in that position where I'm just like, I feel stagnated in service info and reading through codes and TSBs and flow charts and diagrams and looking at scan data. I'm just like, oh, I don't really know where I'm going with this. Just start doing something. Unplug something, take a vacuum hose off, unplug that MAF sensor, right? Block off that, smoke the throttle body, whatever. You don't think there's a vacuum, like, okay, just, obviously this can be a waste of time, but like sometimes you just got to start with somewhere and see what happens, see where it takes you. That's a really good point to bring up.
When you're frustrated, hey, in that case I was, and then even though I paid for service information, I didn't have access to it simply because the metal building. It's just, move, try to keep going, try to keep the ball rolling. And in all honesty, the basics, fundamentals. So much of it is really fundamentals. The other day, well, probably about a month now, I was down at one of my dealerships, and they called me out there to look at some sort of a Jeep. And I go out there, and there's a code for like the fuel rail pressure sensor. Maybe it was a Chrysler Pacifica, so some sort of, CDJR garbage. And I go out there, and I see the code, so I pop the hood. First thing I want to do is a visual inspection. Like, it's all about a process. And so I go and I look, and I'm like, well, we have obviously our sensor right here, and somebody's been down this path before because, well, they've got the old crimp connectors on them. And so it's like, okay, well, what do we do from this point? I tested the basics. It's a 3-wire sensor, and it's a pressure sensor. So, just go back down to the basics. And I'm like, okay, well, this has absolutely everything that it needs. And that sensor is also nice and shiny. And it's an OEM sensor. So for a second there, I was like, the computer's doing what it should be doing. Like, the circuit's all good. Pin fitment is perfect. And, I looked for TSBs, and I didn't find any TSBs. And I ended up getting a phone call. And they're like, hey, there's a star bulletin on this. And that new sensor should come with paperwork that says, hey, you need to relocate pins because there's an updated sensor design. So that kind of comes back down. Everything really comes down to the fundamentals. Mostly comes down to it. That's, following a process.
Yeah. Having that process is huge. Kind of similar to what I was referring to before is go through your process. And even if you don't feel like I'm necessarily on the, I'm on the hunt, like there's times in diagnostics where you're close and you just got to kind of sort a few things out and verify a few things. But then there's times when you're not. You're just like, I don't have a key suspect just yet. And so I'm just kind of grabbing at stuff. But if you follow your process and you go through the things, like, hey, this engine won't start. Okay, fundamentals, air, fuel, spark. How do I check those basic things? You go through it and you might stumble upon where the issue is, even if you're not like really dialed into what exactly it was. I had an Equinox. I did an episode about it where I just happened to find that the injector harness was backwards because I was doing an injector flow test, and the fuel
Okay.
wasn't coming out of the right cylinder. It's like, well, I just did four and one has fuel. Like, what's the deal? I at no point thought in my mind that I was going to find a backwards injector harness. I was looking for, is there fuel getting through these injectors? Because that was part of my process of fuel delivery. I just need to check fuel delivery. Air, fuel, spark. What am I missing? And I just stumbled upon it because, within my testing, I realized something wasn't quite right. And that happens a lot, right? And the better you get at this,
Yeah.
the more hopefully you can just be like, I feel like it's this. I need to go after this. This is definitely the circuit or the component that I'm testing. But hey, sometimes just go through. This is what I need.
Yeah.
This is how it has to work. Let's just go through everything. And you might find or get a little closer to the solution. That's a big thing. You see a lot of videos and stuff out there of everybody just like, I had this car, I tested these four things because I knew what to check, and then I found the problem. Like,
Yeah.
it doesn't always work that way. Like, sometimes you just like, I don't know why this thing's running rich. I'm really not sure. Nothing's standing out to me. Okay, let's go through the things that could cause it to run rich. Let's start testing them one by one and eliminate things as much as possible. That's my strategy some days. It really is.
Yeah. Yeah. Figuring out what's not the problem is very valuable.
Yep. Yeah, definitely. Definitely. And yeah, that all comes back to, the training and the education to be able to do those tests and know what's good and what's bad. But, yeah,
Yeah.
sometimes that's the approach. Figure these things out, man.
So I got called to. I honestly don't remember what year BMW this was. Um, I'm not a car guy, by the way. I confuse BMW and Mini and Toyota and Lexus. All the GM brands, I probably show up and I'm like, oh, I'm here to program a Chevy. They're like, we don't have a Chevy. I'm a Cadillac Buick. Like, just, I know it's of the same variety there. But
Yeah.
so I got called to look at a BMW. The shop actually asked me. They're very happy to wing modules in cars. Um, and it's there's different shops. Like I know when this shop is going to throw a module in a car, it's probably not going to work out. And they call me
Yeah.
and they say, "Hey, we've got this, and it's got a mass airflow sensor code, and it's a crank no start. Do you think it could be the ECM?" And I was like, honestly, I can't really give any insight. I could program it if you want to change it. I could diagnose it, and we could be 100% sure. And so they opt for me to diagnose this thing. And when they said it, I was just like, okay, a mass airflow causing a crank no start. Like it just the thought process there. I I don't know. I don't see it. I guess to some degree, but I really just cannot see that thought process. So I go out there and there's a couple observations that I make, but first thing I want to do is crank it over, see if we have spark, see if we have injector pulse. The absolute most
Mhm.
basic, let me go grab a test light. Well, I have both of those things. And it's just like, okay, so we know it's, not a security issue. Um, so I go back and I current ramp the fuel pump and everything looks good at the fuel pump. So I grab a fuel testing gauge and I take a fuel sample. And I kind of thought it was going to go that way to begin with because when I walked up to this vehicle, there was no cover for the fuel tank and the gas cap was missing.
Oh,
And it had
okay.
just rained that weekend. So
Okay.
um, I take a fuel sample and it's just like, okay, well, hey guys, we've got bad fuel. So that's what it is on the car. Clean out the tank, you'll be good to go here. And
Uh-huh.
that's you know another case where it's like the shop is not thinking about the process and whatnot. And I talked to the technician there, and he was literally afraid. Well, I can't say afraid. The technician was uncomfortable with it being a European car, and it's just like I don't know BMW, and
Mm-hmm.
it's one of those things where it's like, well, man, like suck, squeeze, bang, blow. Um,
Yes, sir.
12 volts is 12 volts, and
Yep.
but let's start
Yep.
there and keep everything the most simple and fundamental that we can, and we can
Mm-hmm.
go more complicated if we have to.
Yeah. The laws of physics don't care what emblems on the front of the vehicle. It's still gonna work the same. And yeah, some of the little intricate stuff, or honestly, it's probably more different on our end of the programming side of things as than the diagnostics, because yeah, it's electricity has no reference as to what vehicle it's in, and air fuel
Yeah,
combustion, right? That's all gonna work the
yeah,
same way. Just a little different setup, a little different construction, but yeah, you still need all those
yeah,
basic things for it to happen.
yep. Yep. So there was that one, and man, there was one that I actually drove all the way down to San Antonio to go and look at, which
Okay.
about an hour and a half drive for me. And this thing, they my buddy Ben asking me to look at this thing for months, and he had a PCM put in it. I don't know, exactly who was making what calls where, but Uh, I know it was at a shop before he got it, and um, it had been out of commission for I want to say 8 months. And
Okay.
so it's a 2020 Ford Escape, and it is a crank no start. But
Uh-huh.
after you crank it that one time, that's it. It will not crank again for probably 10 to 20 minutes.
Okay.
And it's like, okay, well, um, again, he had been asking me to look at this thing for quite a while. So at some point in time, this thing got an ABS module thrown in it,
Uh-huh.
and the ABS module on this is an immobilizer component. So he
Okay.
actually, in the process of this, he got his VSC, programs the ABS module, and still crank no start. And again, after you crank it once, it's done for about 10 to 20 minutes at random. And
Hmm.
so I go down there, and you crank it over, and the first thing that you notice is that the dash where the mileage is, it just nulls out all across it, so you lose your
Okay.
mileage. And this is a collision vehicle, and it's a, I want to say it's like an ambulance vehicle. Maybe they do like dispatch or something in it. Um, but so start kind of going down that process, and I jumped down a rabbit hole. um, you know, not sticking with the process and kind of getting those blinders on. And
Mm-hmm.
but to kind of reel it back, um, what I should have done, in hindsight, was there was a communication code that would pop up every time you'd crank it, and you see all those dashes, which is an indicator of no communication. And I should have just focused on that, the basics, powers, grounds, ability to communicate, and I would have gotten it a lot faster had I done that from the get go. But I ended up getting it. There was actually voltage drop inside of the fuse box, right in the corner where it was hit. Um,
Okay.
there was voltage drop. Yeah, yeah. So it got hit right there on that side. So the fuse box took a pretty good impact there. And so whenever you would crank it, it would drop down to, I want to say, like 4 volts or something that was low enough to where the PCM wasn't happy. and
Okay.
it couldn't keep the voltage up for that 5-volt regulator to keep the PCM um, you know, alive and talking. And so I end up eventually getting on the right path. I throw some powers to it and get the car running. And it's like, okay, well, and this has one of those funky fuse boxes where it's not super ideal, but you can test the power going into it and you can test the power coming out. And
Uh-huh.
so, I simply scoped that, cranked it, didn't have voltage drop going in, had voltage drop coming out. And so that was a fun one, simply because time in between testing was so far
Yeah.
in between each test result,
Yeah.
and it took me way longer. Honestly, it really took me way longer than it should have to catch on to the pattern.
Yeah, that intermittent stuff, man. I don't know. I keep running into it. It's obviously it's a thing that's out there, and people, if the car stops functioning often enough, they want it fixed, and that's why it's in the shop. And I'm up against it with time. I'm trying to
Yeah,
knock out a lot of work every day. I got a lot of shops calling me. I got a lot of appointments, and it is a very challenging one for me. If I had all the time in the world, I'd love to take it on. I'd love to drive your car around for, I don't know, maybe I wouldn't, but it'd be cool to get through some of the weird problems, right? That only happens, once every 45 minutes or whatever, but I can't spend 45 minutes just to experience the problem. And then maybe it doesn't happen for another 45 minutes when I get my stuff hooked up. I have a Lexus right now that this has intermittent parasitic draw on a 17 IS 300. And I first looked at it. I'm like, 60 milliamps, guys, and the battery's full. I don't know what to tell you. And then the next day, they're like, yeah, the battery's dead. Okay, well, it was like, well, you guys want to just test that battery, make sure the battery's good. I tested it, but you guys do the same thing. They're like, yeah, it's good. Okay. Do you want to come back out, look at it? Come back out, look at it, 60 milliamps. Okay. And so they leave it sit over the weekend. Actually, while I was gone on vacation, I come back and they're like, yeah, they're pretty sure this has happened a number of times. Will you take another peek at it? And I go out there after it's been sitting on the weekend. It fires up like after sitting all weekend. I'm like, I was like, I don't even really need to check it for a draw at this point. I know there isn't one, but I did, and it's 60 milliamps. And they really want me to go after it, and it's a good shop. That's my issue. It's like, I really have a good relationship with the shop, but I'm like, guys, because he's like, well, I saw this one time on this Mazda where the shifter didn't go back into part. I'm like, I'm sure you did, and that's a great find, but this is a Lexus, so like the odds of it being exactly the same are pretty unlikely. And like, do you think about all of the different electrical components on this thing that might be coming on? Like, good luck trying to guess at which one it is. I don't have the time to do this. It would have to be something where it's set it up in the shop with a scope with multiple amp clamps going off of different legs of the battery. And I get it onto my Pico, which they'd have to be amp clamps that weren't battery powered. And then you just let it sit there and set an alert on your Pico for which leg off of the power feeds of the battery or the ground distribution spikes. Okay, well, now I can at least limit it down to a fuse box, and then you go deeper from there. But that's something where I'd have to have it set up at a shop with equipment, and I mean, you're charging a boatload of money at that point too, which I guess that's fine. But doing the mobile thing limits you on intermittence is the short version of that story. Is like, I just don't have the time.
Yeah. So do you do draws at all mobile?
I do. I actually like parasitic draws. Gimme. If it's a hard fault, I freaking love parasitic draws. There are some vehicles where they're definitely more challenging than I thought. and depending on how the power distribution is set up and access to components and that sort of thing. But for the most part, I can nail those things. Some of the ones that are real small, you have like 150 milliamp draw and it takes 40 minutes to go to sleep. That's challenging. Intermittent stuff, no thanks. But man, if it's up over half an amp, I feel like I can nail that one pretty quickly. I say that I'm going to get some stupid vehicle tomorrow that just kicks my butt. But
yeah, every time.
Interior lighting circuit that has 50 legs to it. That's what I'm going to get tomorrow just for saying that. But yeah, I do draws.
Okay. Yeah, I try not to do them. If I do them, I tell the shop, hey, look, get it in a bay inside. I want to check this thing first thing in the morning. There's a lot of things. It's like, okay, I need the vehicle prepped a certain way. I need them to have a good battery on this thing. So there's a lot of criteria that have to be met in order for me to even consider it. But it's one of those things too where I try to stay away from it just from a business standpoint and try to keep the ball rolling. But it's also the curious side of me is like, man, I want to figure out what's going on.
Right. If I get into one, I get involved with one, I definitely want to solve it and figure out where that draw is coming from. But it's there's definitely more lucrative work out there than those. You charge appropriately, just like anything else, charge appropriately. But sometimes they can be fairly time consuming. I don't want to take one on at Friday afternoon. There's no way.
Yeah.
But I'll definitely take those because a lot of people don't want to do them. Those little Snicker bar sized amp clamps, those are beast for those because I'll just hook them around the different legs off the battery and get an idea of, okay, what power distribution source has the draw. Okay, now I've limited it down to there. Can I amp clamp anything else off of that? Sometimes no. Okay, can I amp hound the tops of the fuses? A lot of times yes, sometimes no. Okay, last resort, what can I pull out of here? I avoid pulling stuff because it wakes stuff up on a lot of cars, but sometimes that's what you're down to. You can also look at what's the size of the draw. What's the size of the draw and what could potentially be on? Is this a module type draw, 6/10 of an amp? Or is this like 2-3 amps? Like something's on doing some work, or maybe there's a network awake. That's the other thing. Like there's a whole series of modules awake, 2-3 amps, right? Like, so you can use clues to kind of help guide you towards what's staying on. There's some pattern failures there too. Although with modern vehicles, man, I think the unique ones are so much more common now. But I got my butt kicked on a Ford Edge one time where the tire pressure monitor module was turning off and turning on and turning off and turning on and turning off and turning on. So the parasitic draw, well, I wouldn't call it intermittent, but it was pulsing. It would draw for about 2-3 minutes and then it would go to sleep. And then a couple of minutes later, it would come back on, 2-3 minutes, go to sleep. And that one killed me. I made a bad call on that. I put a cluster in it and I fucked around forever and finally got to the source eventually. But I just had one a couple weeks ago where I put my amp clamp around there and I watched it turn on and off. And it was like, oh, I know where I'm going with this. I went right back to the tire pressure module, unplugged it, fixed it. And so I like to think my hours put into the first one saved me quite a bit of time on the second one that I saw,
Yeah, no, for sure. That's, you get your ass kicked on that one car, and a lot of times you don't forget it. Sometimes you do. I find myself there too.
Yeah. I know I fixed this one before. What did I do?
Yeah, for sure. So there's something else I'm not sure if I'm going to lose you here. I wanted to pull up some notes here.
Okay.
Okay. This honestly, it was just because it is the most recent diag that I got to deal with. Um,
Okay.
so I dealt with a 2020 Jeep Compass, and they asked me to program a PCM in this thing, and so I go through, do the programming. I was kind of in a particular situation where this is GPEG 2A, so I ended up having to do some EEPROM magic to make it happen. Um, I do have my vehicle security credentials, but in this particular situation, um, it was from one shop to another shop and the other shop's customer, and we
Mm,
couldn't do anything in like an efficient amount of time. So I just,
sure.
ended up going the EEPROM route, and
Mm-hmm.
so I get everything back together though, and go plug it in, and I go to crank this thing up, and the dash, the needles are just like flickering like this, and it's just like, okay, maybe the battery voltage. I check the battery voltage, and I'm like, wait, we're good on the battery voltage. Okay. I looked down at my scan tool, and I lost communication with my micropod for a minute, and I end up going and talking to the shop, and they're like, that's what it was doing before, and we thought for sure it had to be the ECM. So
Okay.
I'm sitting there in the driver's seat. I could see out over like on the bench they have a power distribution center, well the fuse box, and then they've got a whole harness, and then we just finished doing the PCM on this thing, and the first thing that I noticed, like looking at that, and after throwing a scope on it, just right there at the battery, check for voltage drop, and or see what
Mm-hmm.
that battery is dropping to, and it looked great. I mean, the car wasn't really cranking, so um, I mean, not a whole lot of amperage going through there, but
Sure.
it's trying to pull something when you see those gauges flickering, and
Uh-huh.
every time that I lost communication with the micropod, I had it hooked up to my breakout box, and it was jumping down to like 3 volts, and at that point, I'm like, okay, well, let's do a check here, and sure enough, it was dropping down to I want to say 3.2 volts. So I'm like, okay, let's go from the battery and start checking all the different fuses right there at the battery. You've got all the different legs that run to the PDC, and
Uh-huh.
so I check everything there. Everything's good, and I'm like, okay, well, I go and I just pick any random fuse. I honestly forget. I just remember as fuse number 30. I don't remember what that ran and why I went there, but I took the AES Waves kit, plugged into it, went to go crank it, and sure enough, same exact voltage drop happening.
Okay.
So on this thing though, I'm in this fuse number 30 slot with the AES Wave kit, and I scope it, and I see the voltage drop there, and I check everything right there at the battery, at the fusible links right there at the battery, and everything checks out good. So I ended up just jumping a power into the fuse box. The car
Okay.
starts and runs. Now, mind you, this was basically two different tests done in just a couple of minutes, and the tech, when he heard that car fire up, he just like looked at me, and the look on his face was like he was just completely shocked that the car was running in just a couple of minutes of testing there.
Yeah.
And so I was talking to him about it, and I just walking through exactly what I was seeing and why I did what I did. um, and then I went through and started to kind of jump down and try to dig through it, but just because of the setup on this vehicle, it wasn't ideal for me to get to where I needed to do any more testing without asking for more time from the shop. Um, so I just approached the shop owner and I was like, hey, look, this is where we're at. Um, we do know that we have a voltage drop problem. It is not the battery. It is not here across these fuses right there at the battery. But it is, somewhere from the cable to the PDC,
Okay.
and maybe even in the PDC. But they
Uh-huh.
just replaced that. So that's one where honestly I'm hoping that I get to go back and look at it again, just because I want to actually see what the real fault was there.
Yeah. Sometimes that sucks as a mobile guy. You don't see the conclusion. And
Yeah,
it's like I would expect most shops to get back to me if I made the wrong call and it didn't
yeah,
fix it. I'd expect that. And hey, that happens sometimes. They call me like, hey, you told us to put in this and it didn't fix it. But I
yeah,
always wonder, like when I never hear anything back, I'm like, I wonder if that actually fixed it. I wonder if the customer approved the job. I wonder
yeah,
if they were able to get parts, whatever. I always like that conclusion, but you don't always get it as a mobile guy. Sometimes you just move on with your life and you never. If I go back to the shop, I'll ask them. I'm like, hey, what happened with the blank? Oh yeah, we put that thing in there and it fixed it or whatever, But yeah,
yeah,
that not having the like concrete conclusion in front of your face kind of sucks sometimes, for sure, man.
yeah,
But
for sure.
that's that's part of the gig. But cool, man. Thanks for joining me this evening. This was cool, and we definitely got to meet up at one of the training events sometime soon. Did you say you're going to Vision?
Yeah, I definitely plan on going to Vision. Hopefully, I can get out to more of the other training events here. Um, but it just really depends.
Yeah, right. That's tough. You gotta set aside the income from the time that you're gone, and
Yeah,
then play catch up when you get back. And so it is a bit of a sacrifice, but I try to make it
yeah,
to at least a couple a year if I can.
yep, yep. And honestly, like I loved going to Vision. Um, the biggest thing, though, in all honesty, was just the networking.
Oh yeah, 100%. That's that's worth the price of admission, even if you didn't sign up for any classes. If you just hung out in the hallways the whole time with other people, that would be worth going. That's where it's at, man.
But dude, I really appreciate you having me on here, and maybe I'll run into you sometime at a training event.
Yes, sir. Yeah, I look forward to it. Thank you. Okay, that's gonna do it for today's episode. Thank you, JC, for sitting down with me, and thank you, all the listeners, for tuning into the show and all the feedback that I've got. Really appreciate all of it. Appreciate everybody listening. And if you got any ideas for the show, someone that you'd like to hear from on the show, or you want to be on the show, reach out to me. You'll find my email in the show notes along with the Facebook group. You can contact me through Messenger. It's probably the quickest way to get a response. Sean Tipping on Facebook. Otherwise, let's all get out there, start fixing the world one car at a time.